On Citizens Are Today, we will examine how Gen Z or Generation Z is using technology, social movements, and new media to hold leaders accountable, expand civic space, and promote inclusive governance, and how they shape future of democratic governance. Our guest today on the program is Indigen Job, the Deputy Speaker with the National Youth Parliament of the Gambia. Indigen, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christopher, for having us.
Right. And also, all the way from Ghana, we have Kolete Obuade, who is an African youth activist in Ghana. Kolete, welcome to the program once again.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm highly honored to be on the program.
So let's actually get conversation underway at the moment. And just want to begin with you, Indigen. Want to find out from you. You are the Deputy Speaker of Gambia's Youth Parliament, and you actively work with young people. What do you see young people's interests in democratic conversations?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christopher, for that engaging question. And I first want us to look at a generation of young people that we are talking about. And the Gen Z are the category of young people who are in their late teens and also between their late teens and their late 20s. And if you look at the average of the youth age, we're talking about a group that are the prime of young people. And also, like you said, the digital age generation that have actually witnessed a lot of democratic, but also undemocratic, and also a lot of chaotic, how to say it, a lot of democratic transitions and chaotic transitions and undemocratic transitions in Africa, especially in our sub-region. So this is a generation very rich when it comes to experience of what governance actually looks like in our sub-region. However, it's also a generation that is playing a very crucial role when it comes to democracy in our sub-region. I would just look at it on the basis of the physical implementation of democracy. These are young people currently that are one of the generation that are the most active participants of democracy when it comes to voting for elections, when it comes to voter mobilization. My apologies in advance. My environment is not baby proof, so you will know you'll be hearing them. And yes, these are the generation that do voter mobilization, especially the mobilization of young people in elections, but also in the case of the Gambia, where you have all three of our citizen observer groups, two of which are youth found and youth led and youth membered. You found this generation of young people leading citizen observations in elections to ensure that our democratic processes are free and fair and as well participatory. And also, these are also the generation of young people that you find demanding for our rights, but also asking questions when it comes to democracy, organizing protests and organizing citizen assemblies to ensure that we ask the questions that other generations were not asking. We ask for accountability, but also we ask, in the case of the Gambia currently, where did our generational wealth go to? And we become very important demography when we are talking about harnessing the demographic dividend, but also consolidating democracy. In the Gambia currently, with a lot of issues going on, including accounting for the assets that were seized from Jame, that were looted from the Gambians. It is Gen Z that is asking, where is our generational wealth that Jame looted from us, that we were expecting it will have gone back to the people to better their life, most especially the victims of Jame. So yeah, Gen X in the Gambia and around the sub-region are doing wonders in various aspects, educating when it comes to voter education, when it comes to promoting the values of democracy. However, Christopher, it is a fact that we must accept that also the lack of trust in democracy is also creeping into the values of the same generation, and it is something that we must address and that we must confront as countries. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Indigen, for that opening remarks. And of course, so from where you sit, you have lots of trust in the Gen Zs, that they're seeking accountability, they're seeking, they are probing for results. And let me go all the way to Ghana, where my other colleague is, and then find out whether indeed that is the same thing happening in Ghana. Do we see the Gen Zs seeking accountability? Do we see the Gen Zs taking the bull by the horn to ask the leaders? Or other school of thought arguing that no, these are people who are just concerned about trends, social media activities, and they are not really using it for democratic conscious activities. In Ghana, what is the situation like?
Thank you, Christopher. And in recent times, the young generation, like the way you call them, the Jay-Z, has been like in the forefront, where they have been, organized demonstrations, fix the country. There has been several, pockets of interventions by the young generation to sort of hold the government accountability to what's going on, and then to be able to challenge the current narrative where the people or the citizens feel that the government is not responsive enough to the pressing needs and the economic challenges that we are encountering in Africa. But I don't think that the situation in Ghana is just unique to Ghana. I think the challenges that we are facing currently today in Africa, they have been with us for some time now. It's just that the Gen Z generation, they have been exposed to a new age where they can sort of find new methods, or they are like mass media outlets to be able to champion some of these issues, to be able to mobilize these issues, to be able to connect with the globe, and to be able to bring, concerned people together to challenge some of these narratives. But you can understand, like the earlier speaker said, about the trust in democracy. And if you see what's happening in West Africa specifically, you see that the democratic constituency is losing a certain trust or a certain validity, because we don't see the needs of our people being met, and that 4 years and waiting every 4 years to vote is becoming unbecoming. It's not enough for the current young generation, because the younger generation today, they are looking for answers now. They want to make sure things are done now. They want quick response. They want to have things done now. Unfortunately, Africa has gone through the challenges where things don't happen. The things that would take like a day or two to happen elsewhere in the world, around the world, it can take 2 weeks, 3 weeks in Africa. So we are going through a phase where there's going to be some, interventions coming from the Gen Z, because they don't understand why we have to wait. They cannot understand the culture of waiting, and they cannot tolerate some of these challenges that perhaps older generations or previous generations have sort of tolerated. So I can see some confusion, because the younger generation, the Jay-Z, would like to intervene in the situation, but it's also an issue of class struggle. It's an issue of ideological positioning. It's an issue of democracy that is defined by the African himself, because the imposition, the Western style democracy that is currently being propagated, they call it the multi whatever democracy. I mean, it is not trickling down to the ground. The masses are still not being liberated from poverty. The masses are still not being liberated from disenfranchisement. So we are in a situation where people, especially the Gen Z generation, they want solutions, they want answers. But what I can say is they have to start playing leadership roles and not just waiting for answers to come. They would also have to what? Ask themselves, what can we do to make this democracy in Africa functional? Because the issue is how functional is the current democracy in Africa? But the Gen Z would like to make sure that democracy in Africa is functional. It's functional and it's working.
Let me still stay with you, Kolati. It means that are we alluding to the fact that the school of thought that are saying that, look, the young people, because you clearly in Ghana, you know what a one-time MP said, that you, the youth, you are just there and your beard is just growing, you're keeping it, and then you don't have anything in your head, and therefore you need to go to the old man and then seek for knowledge and understanding. Meaning to say that the youth are unconcerned about matters of democracy and are not really concerned about taking the future into their own hands now, using all the opportunities available to them. Are you debunking that school of thought or that assertion that young people are not concerned about democracy? Therefore, we are indeed concerned about democracy.
The issue about young people not showing concern for democracy is neither here nor there. Young people currently in Africa are having a rude awakening. They're beginning to see that, look, the world depends on Africa for resources. And yet, if you come to Africa, most of us are impoverished, or the majority of the people in Africa are impoverished. And that does not make sense. Because for years, for how many years now, past generations, subsequent generations, they don't question some of these arguments, even though you hear it being discussed here or there. But that current Gen Z generation, they want answers. And if you want answers, it means they are going to talk truth to power. And that the politician of today cannot last long with the Gen Z generation. Because the Gen Z generation is just going to be a matter of time. They are going to make sure that they put their own people in power. Because the current generation of African leaders are not really responding to the pressing needs of the current generation, of the Gen Z. So to me, there's a looming crisis for democracy in Africa, because the democratic practice currently is lacking in some functionality, some responsive nature to the pressing needs of the majority of our people. And so how long are we going to, because the current politicians in Africa are sort of keeping the masses in check instead of liberating the masses. And that is the challenge of the Gen Z. You have to liberate the masses. You have to liberate the masses, the people in Africa, from all their poverty, all their diseases, environmental challenges, and everything. But if you are going to use it to, you say, oh, they are young people, they are not ready for leadership, they are not ready to understand the present issues, we are wrong about that. These people are ready. These people understand. Sometimes they even understand it better than we do. So it's time for the ruling class in Africa to put the Gen Z generation at the heart of affairs, right, so that they are able to understand what's going on and come up with the pressing solutions, because that is what we need today in Africa.
Right, and so you've made a clarion call to the current leadership or political class that, look, it's time you put the Gen Zs at the helm of affairs, because they are indeed interested in every decision that you take now to affect the future. And that would make me to go back once again to the Gambia and then engage Indigene Job once again. How are the Gen Z's individual, particularly participating in democratic processes beyond voting?
Thank you very much, Christopher. If I get you right, you're asking about the role of Gen Z in enhancing democracy by voting and by participating directly in elections. Am I right?
I am asking that how are the Gen Z's individual, particularly participating in democratic processes being beaten?
Okay, thank you very much. I think one very important minor gesture that the Gen Z take up that we usually don't see is the rejection of tokenism when it comes to democratic governance. Gen Z don't patronize tokenism. They don't sit on the table just to be counted. When we sit on the table is because it's either we have the authority to make decisions or the authority to speak on behalf of our country and on behalf of our demography, which is a very important of democracy. Like my colleague from Ghana just alluded to, this is a generation that asks questions of why. For so long, things are happening, and I don't know whether it's pretend or we take it as normal, but Gen Z asks the questions of why am I here? And if not to be counted, what decision do I have to make? And in the case of the Gambia, unfortunately, when it comes to elections, our election data is not aggregated by age. And as such, we are not able to account for what are the ages, the age range of youth participation in our democratic processes. But I can tell you, during elections, almost all our election staffs are usually young people of this age. Our election observers are young people of this age. Voters, you see a lot of voters that go out to vote who are young people of this age. But like my colleague from Ghana is saying, these are normal democratic practices that we have been exercising since post-independence. But what is it changing in our lives? How is it working out for us? That is the problem of the Gen Z. We are asking, what is the style of democracy contributing to the life of the masses? It has gone to a point that you see the Gen Z of West Africa no more cares what kind of governance, what system of governance we have in place, so far as it is working for the people. Unfortunately, that is why you see people celebrating coup d'etat, celebrating dictatorship in West African countries. It is because we have resort to a time where it's not about who vote and where we vote and who we voted for. It's about who is making these systems work for us. And if we take a step back, the truth is we are using the system that colonized us to free us. And common sense will tell us that it's not working and it will not work. In the case of the Gambia, we still have colonial laws that are still not revised to suit the present generation. And we have colonial practices to enforce democratic principles that require this generation's fulfillment. And it is not working and it will not work. And for Gen Z, we want, it's not our desires always to organize citizen assembly, to protest and all that. I know we are seen as a very problematic generation, but it is because that is what we can resort to. When we call for dialogue, it becomes about tokenism. You see ministers, you see National Assembly members come to these gatherings, give big speeches, acknowledge the presence of the young people, and then that is the end. No follow-up, no accountability, and nothing. And as such, we are saying, what can we do to ensure that we are heard? And I know you must have heard of this last month when the young people of the Gambia called Gambia Against Looted Assets.
Yes, Gala.
Exactly. Gala came out to protest. At first, there were not many. There were just few in the streets. But the moment they were arrested, the other young people were like, I did not want to go out to protest, but why are my mates protesting and you are arresting them? It's their right. And we have suddenly within 3 days, we have seen a nationwide mobilization and protest looming from every corner of the country, which could have, grown so much big that it would have been out of control, and government have to actually bend to the request of the young people, even though it wasn't satisfactory. The list they provided was a makeup list and here and there. But then we have seen it work. When we go out and enforce our demands, that is when we get answers. And as such, it becomes the new norm for us. We want to redefine what democracy means to us. Beyond the voting, beyond the elections, beyond putting out candidates. It's about fulfillment. It's about what is happening at the national level in terms of policies, in terms of implementation, trickling down and having impact in the life of the individuals in our communities. And this includes redefining what happiness index means, what GDP index aggregation means, and other the indexes that are used to actually measure democracy around the world.
Let me still stay with you and find out, in all of these, how then can the Gen Z generation be part of decision making and policy making in terms of inclusivity? Are there, because we have already established the problem that because they are not there, and so problems and decision makings are made without their involvement, and if they're unhappy about it, then we see them go on the streets to protest, to say that where is our generational wealth and matters like that. But from the source, which is the policy implementation, the source, which is how things should be done, are young people involved at that stages?
First of all, it's important to recognize that the barriers are structural, and they're so much structural that young people are fighting every day to break these barriers to get to decision-making processes, and it's difficult. Usually, it's either age restriction in serving political positions, or or structural issues such as economic empowerment, and such as some biases that are placed, against young people. However, Gen X is a generation that have noticed that we need to get to the table to actually become part of the solutions. So yes, we are taking bold steps to ensure that we sit on the table by vying for positions to fill up the decision-making positions. However, there are critical steps to be done first that Gen Z around the continent is doing, and that is mobilization. Gen Z is mobilizing and massively mobilizing, and we have come to realize that when we mobilize, usually we take our authority and give it to the older generation and say, we are behind you, do what is needed, and we are here to support. And we have realized for so long it's not working, and so we are mobilizing. Because it will not take few or one to say, I am vying for election, vote for me, and we break these stereotypes. No, it requires mobilization from South Africa to Gambia, from Morocco to Congo, to ensure that we do this as a generation to our continent, to inspire from one continent to another. This is something that other generations were not able to do, but we are. Young people of West Africa are having platforms across the region to ensure that we communicate, we mobilize, we inspire each other into doing things, but also we are mobilizing at continental level through structures, but also through informal structures to ensure that we have each other's back, each other's support. And that is why what happens today in Kenya, before an hour, you will hear it spread across Africa, because we give information through both our formal and informal structures just to empower each other and have each other's back.
Right. And so since mobilization is now becoming a big force, which the Gen Zs are now using, including myself, we are now using to demand accountability and to push forward what is rightfully ours, to consolidate democracy. That is made possible by digitization and technological advancement, and so we see the presence of social media really come to play, and that would now make us to jump or extend the conversation further to the role of technology and digital activism. Let's look at it. Let me go to Kolete in Ghana and find out from him that, sir, in what ways has social media really empowered Gen Zs to influence political change, and if there are some critical examples that you can actually cite?
Social media definitely has done a lot. I mean, regarding mass mobilization, fix the country, a few interventions by the youth, Gen Z, they mobilize with social media. But I've always noticed, like most African movements, is there's a lack of clear-cut ideological understanding of where we are, where Africa is in the global scheme of affairs, and where we can go. The part of our problems is culture, culture, culture. Because in Africa, the older generation, they don't think like you. You need to give leadership to the young people while we sit down so the young people can take over. We're not like that. In Africa, we're not like that. Culturally, we always think the older people should be in front, they should lead, they should, drive development. But that is changing. And because that must change, because Gen Z must understand that there has to be a clear-cut ideological understanding that we have to lead, you have to lead. If you want to change the world to the ways that you think is in your interest, you can't sit on a fence and expect older people to make that happen for you. You have to also get up from the fence, join the mobilization, join the organization, and contribute. Because this time, Africa must succeed. We cannot continue, importing. We're not manufacturing. We're not directing our own development. We're not funding our own development. So the Gen Z generation has a huge responsibility, because the older generation, they have this thinking that, look, Africa is not really going to work out. So they pretend like they're doing something, but really they're not doing anything. They pretend like, we can make it happen, but really they don't want to make anything happen. They just want things to remain the way they are. But the Gen Z generation knows that things cannot remain the way they are now. So I see a lot of challenges in front of us. But you see, the Gen Z leaders must educate their people. They must understand the class struggle going on in Africa. They must understand the political economy. They must understand that the democracy that the Western nations have imposed on most African countries are not going to help us. And some of the challenges recently regarding the military takeovers in West Africa are partly a response to some of these challenges. Because since the 60s to now, we haven't succeeded in the democratic experiment. The democratic experiment hasn't given us any credible validity that we can say, yes, in fact, this experiment has done a lot of good. So there's a challenge for the emerging generations in Africa, especially the young ones, to look at the situation holistically and think about having our own democracy that puts our people first, that puts our needs in first. We need to start thinking of a global African agenda where African power is at the heart and center of everything we do. It is when we get to that stage then African democracy will have meaning. African democracy will be fruitful. For until we get there, the African democracy is just a wishy-washy 4 years voting and that's all. And it's not enough. And the Gen Z generation must do something about that. They must become leaders. That is what I think. The Gen Z generations must become leaders of tomorrow, leaders of today and tomorrow. Because the burdens that is going to happen, it will be on you. We are the ones going to face the huge burdens. So why don't you lead? Take the decisions now and save the future of Africa tomorrow.
Let me also jump all the way to Gambia and then have conversation with the Deputy National Speaker in the Youth Parliament. And we want to find out that amidst disinformation and misinformation, how then should the Gen Zs be very critical of it to still maintain their civic activism? And I'd want you to also tie that in with most of the times we see online petitioning we want the government to do this, and so we are mobilizing petition signatories onto a particular agenda to push for a particular cause. Are those online petitions really producing results? Because a country like Nigeria, their government will say, I am not on social media. That's what the president says. I am not on social media. And so the young people on social media means that they see them to be in a different world, and then we are also in a different world. Marry these two.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christopher. First, we need to acknowledge that misinformation, disinformation, fake news have a place where there is information void. Usually it's because the information is not readily available to the public, and that is why they usually, either fabricate fake news or misinformation or disinformation to actually fill in that void. It is a natural human need to have access to information, especially in matters that really concerns you. And it's important. However, across the continent, we have youth combating misinformation and disinformation across the continent. Almost now in every country that you visit, you will find young people who are whose main advocacy style is ensuring that they fight misinformation, they flag disinformation and fake news, and provide accurate and timely information to the masses, even if it takes petitioning certain institutions to either access to information commissions or to the National Assembly, or even taking to the streets to ensure that those informations are readily available to the public. And you're right. Usually, also we are faced with our activism being contradicted or being opposed by fake news from either the government or the elderly generation of what our cause intention is really about. And it becomes very difficult when we are trying to make impact. But like I said, we keep ensuring that we flag these fake news and misinformation and disinformations, provide accurate news on time to the public, and use all medias available to ensure that we fight this. I have seen a lot of those online petitions in the continent and around the sub-region. It is not something very prominent in the Gambia. I think I just saw it once or twice by an online media called What's on Gambia, and that one was really submitted to the National Assembly committee to look into the matter. I think it was it had something to do with corruption scandal in our Gambia Ports Authority, and it was submitted to the National Assembly for investigation. But we continue to use social media. We continue to use technology to ensure that we combat this. And even ECOWAS at the regional level, they're worried of the issue of fake news. But again, in our last convergence that we have in Ghana in the past month during the Africa at 58 celebration, we told them if the people don't have readily available information, it becomes difficult, because now we have seen West Africa disintegrating, and we have seen how propaganda is taking over, promoting dictatorship, promoting developments in countries led by military juntas around the sub-region. And it's really giving tough time to ECOWAS. But again, we are like, if you listen to us, we can do this together. But we need to be in the center of this. We need to sit in the decision-making table to ensure that, this is done. And the most disheartening thing right now that is happening in West Africa is the disconnect between the West African youth and the youth of the Sahel. We were once all West African youths, doing beautiful collaborations, wonderful partnerships. But now we don't even have channel of communications, because, the region is disintegrating. And for me, as a youth leader, I don't think what our governments choose to do because of their selfish reasons should really contribute to us being disconnected from our partnerships, from our collaborations that we were doing to better our region.
You touched about ECOWAS bringing in the regional body, and we know at ECOWAS level there is the ECOWAS Youth Council, and they seek to at least rope in young people into the full of leadership at the regional level. And we want to find out that aside that, how should government and the regional body itself be concerned about implementing measures and implementing initiatives that support youth to now be the next leaders?
Thank you, Christopher. I think what you're asking is about the intentionality of our government, both at country and at regional level, in ensuring youth participation and leadership. And this question is very important because at the end of the day, we have different forums, interfaces, talk, but how intentional are these conversations? Because if we really want the youth to lead and actually have influence in what is happening in our governance, we need to put up policies and laws to ensure that. And the social challenges and the economic challenges are so real that it needs effort to combat. And I think one thing we need to do that is to by start, even if it is going to be for a buffer period.
Hello?
Hello, Christopher. Sorry about that. I think we need to have at least if it's going to be a buffer period of years. For example, in the cases of Kenya, where we have a period of 10 to 20 years, where there is going to be reserved seats for young people in various stages of governance for a certain period of years. Let's say in the next 10 years, it is going to be we're going to be very intentional about youth participation. As such, we're going to reserve seats in parliament for young people. Government must reserve seats for young people in the executive and all decision-making institutions across our countries and also at ECOWAS level. With this, there will be a foundation laid for young people, for us to do the work, do the mobilization, but also usher in other generations of young people to fill in. Because again, we need success stories from young people. We need youth champions to be able to tell their story of how they get there and how they make the impact. And if we don't create these allowances, we might not have these success stories for a long period of time. But also apart from that, it's a reality in our sub-region and even in Africa, the cost of politics. And this starts from the cost of even nomination for candidature in variously. The young people of the continent, the reality is we don't have those amounts. Even after mobilization, if we do the nomination before elections, those mobilized funds are gone. So it's time we become intentional as countries to make those nomination amounts very realistic to ensure that young people can afford democracy. Because as of now, we cannot afford democracy. All we do is being followers, being supporters, mobilizers, because we can't afford what it takes to lead when it comes to elections, vying for these positions. So allowances need to be created in these institutions to ensure that young people are on the table to make the decisions. And just I had my colleague from Ghana who was talking about Africa and how we are a source of raw materials and all that. And it's not only in governance. African youth are also taking charge of the Africa Free Trade Agreement. Some time back we were in Gabon and we sorry in the yes, in Gabon, and we were asking the question of why is it easier for China to trade with Africa than Africa to trade with Africa? And why is it easy for other continents to transcend our borders? And it is hell for us to go through each other's borders. And even going through that meeting, we have to spend 3 more hours in the airport just for our visas to be processed. And it's a lot of frustration for even the African youth to trade among ourselves. We have the advantage of the of internet, of social media to actually be able to communicate and trade. But when it gets to the point of taking our goods from point A to point B, it's even easier to actually export to the European Union than to export to another country in the African Union. And beyond governance, this is also a conversation that young people are starting to mobilize around, to say, if we need to develop this country, it is not only about young people being presidents, vice president, National Assembly members, but we also need to be the trade tycoons of this continent to be able to move this continent forward, to be able to process our raw materials back home and trade it among each other. What does West Africa have? We have cosmetics, we have shea butter, we have palm kernel nuts, we have other things. Why can't we process this into finished goods and sell it to other parts of Africa, and other parts of Africa do the same thing with the goods that they're rich in and trade it to West Africa? But our borders are difficult to transcend, and trade is very difficult to Africa for the young African. Thank you.
Well, interesting point, and I remember very well that point is also well established by Austin Aigbe, who is advocacy officer for WADR. He says that if ECOWAS is unable to have political stability, it would be difficult to even have economic stability as well. But let me make Quality also have a bite on some of the initiatives and some of the challenges that those at the top are not creating that room and space for young people to develop and to thrive.
Christopher, you know, the African challenge, it's a whole mixture of many factors, because like initially I said earlier that one of the challenges is culture. In Africa, you hardly see a parent say, I'm resigning for my son to take over the business, while I mean he's still available or around, but that narrative is changing. And so we need to define what our place is in the world as Gen Z, as Africans. We need to start asking ourselves, where and what is our power? What is African power in the world? How do we harness this African power? How do we, consolidate and advance African power? Because everybody is advancing their interest. Every group is advancing their interest. We're the only ones in Africa where, when it comes to advancing our interest, we'll have to go and have a meeting with China. We'll have to go and have a meeting with Russia. We'll have to make a meeting with Europe. We have to go and have a meeting with America. Why can't we sit with our own African group and decide that this is the way forward for the next 50 to 100 years? This is where we're going. So the Gen Z generation, our goal, or the goal of the leaders, is not just mobilization, but knowledge. You need to arm yourself with knowledge. You need to arm yourself with the class struggle, because we have conservatives, we have liberals, and we have the masses, the peasants. You need to understand the relationship, the production relationship between all the social classes, and how imperialism and neocolonialism is also what? Influencing the African scene. So the challenge is not going to go away, but we're not going to also sit down and expect things to work or things to change unless we get out from the fence, unless we do what we can do, however minute, however little. We have to also contribute, because like Frans Fanon said, every generation has to define their mission and decide whether they are going to accomplish the mission or betray the mission. So Gen Z will have to define their mission for today and decide whether they're going to achieve and accomplish that mission, or they're going to betray the mission. For the past generations, apart from the independence generation, those who got independence for Africa, the others have just been, excuse my language, they have been very, very, very dysfunctional generations. Very dysfunctional. The generation that came after independence, they have done nothing for Africa. They have actually connived and colluded with imperialists and the neo-colonial forces to run African down, to rack Africa with processed foods from around the world, and crippling Africa's manufacturing base. The Gen Z will have to wake up to these realities and create our own political economy, create our own African democracy, where the interest of the African is supreme, not what World Bank is saying, not what IMF is saying, not what France is saying to Francophone countries, not what Britain is saying, not what China or Russia is saying, but what we, the Africans, are saying. That is when African power will have its functionality and essence, and we can control that so that our people will be happy on the continent.
Right. Let me still stay a while longer with you, though we're about to actually wrap up. And I'd want you, in your submission, you're talking about knowledge, that the Gen Z ought to be educated. And that comes back to our educational system. So I'd want you to take this one or have a bite on this, that how can education system better prepare young people for responsible and informed democratic participation?
Is this for me?
Yes.
The education currently has to be rewritten by the Gen Z. We have to understand that the education that our ancestors, our forefathers have used, have turned us into second and third class citizens of the world, have turned us into people who have no opinions of themselves, who have no concrete knowledge of themselves. We need to have the kind of education where we are forcing the African student, we're asking them what they think. What is your opinion on this policy? What do you make of that policy? You need the African to feel that he is the owner of his own. He is the owner of his world. He is the owner of the African continent. IMF opinion, World Bank opinion must be seen as nothing compared to the opinion on African leader. Until the opinions of Africans become primary, key component for driving our development, whereas an assessment from World Bank or some international organization is put ahead of what an African organization is saying. We need to understand that, look, the education we need is the kind of education that makes us in charge of our continent, not an education that World Bank or somebody else in charge. Our own education will put us as masters of our own and drivers of our own.
Right. Let me go back once again to Gambia and then engage Indigen about what are the potential dangers for the Gen Zs to disengage from politics due to the disappointment or political fatigue. It could be from young people themselves placed at leadership position and they have failed, together with failure from the older generation.
Yeah, the dangers are currently imminent. It is chaos and anarchy and unorganized governance. We have seen it currently in the sub-region, how people are actually patronizing and praising dictatorship, or let me say military regime around the continent. It is because, eventually people are losing hope of democracy, and those are the dangers, and it leads to anarchy. We have seen how it leads to the disintegration, just the beginning of the disintegration of ECOWAS. I pray it stops here. I pray the Sahel countries come back to ECOWAS, because it is to our interest if we can stay as a bloc and begin as a bloc. However, these are the effects that it is having, that it is the younger generation that are having that are losing hope of democracy. And if it continues, what will happen is they will stop participating in democracy and will resort to protests, will resort to aggressive citizen assemblies, will resort to coups around the sub-region and other forms of organization that they think will work for their generation and also will work for their communities in the grassroots. It might be it might work, it might not work, and that is where the dangers lie. That means we'll go through a whole generation of experimenting again what kind of setting, what kind of governance works for us. And at a point where Africa is in its prime, at a point where our countries are in its prime, where the conversation should have been fighting for a place, for a first place in the global setting, rather than internal issues such as the type of governance we need. It will drag us back years back. That means we have to organize our house first before we are out there in the world to actually talk about which row of the world meeting is our seat placed in. And very unfortunate, but that is what we are experiencing, and these are the dangers. So as long as us as a generation, not I will not say us as a generation, because we have been trying our best since we have become eligible participants of democracy, but the older generation have not consciously sit down to really understand that it's time they hand over. It's time they engage in meaningful and participatory dialogue. It's time they accept that we have become older and we have become the present and the future. This will continue, these threats will continue to develop. And always we will say, when we meet at ECOWAS level and we ask what is happening in our region is grave, what can we do? We said, it's not like we don't have the solutions. We have. It's not like we know what is happening. We know what is happening. It's just that the older generation is pretending they're doing some work when we are not actually not doing some work. And give us the space. We know what to do, and we are going to do it. And this is what is going to salvage our countries. This is what is going to salvage West Africa, and this is what is going to salvage Africa at large. We are tired of having groupings where we say these are the youth forums, these are the women forums. We want to have interfaces where we sit with our leaders and have responsible conversations about what is happening. Let them tell us what they're doing and what they think, and we tell them what they're doing, what they think. We have agreements, we have timelines, and we hold each other accountable with this. If not, the dangers will continue to loom. This generation will continue to lose hope in democracy. West Africa will continue to disintegrate. Our countries will run into chaos, and we will have to go back 10, 20, 50 years back in organizing our nations, unfortunately.
Right. As we wrap up on this, let me give it to you, Colette. Then from there, come to Gambia. Your wrap-up comment.
Thank you, Christopher. I would like to use this opportunity to reach out to the youth of Africa and to encourage the youth to not to be down, not to lose hope. People have sacrificed for us to come to this point, and so it's like a rally, a baton, and that it's time for us to also take it and to run as fast as we can. But we must not lose hope. We must have faith. We must believe that we're here with a purpose to contribute to global peace, global prosperity, and we are here to make a difference. And we are not going to keep sitting on the fence. We must stop sitting on the fence. We must also jump into the political arena, jump into the mobilization, jump into the organization, and contribute your quota. We can make Africa a paradise.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colette from Ghana. And then let's take Indigen.
The conversation continues at continental level, but like he said, we need to take the forefront in the political space, in the trade space, in every other space that we will lead to take this continent forward. Thank you, Christopher, for the invitation, and it was a pleasure being here.
Right, lady and gentlemen, thank you so much too for your time with me on the program. Well, listeners, this is the match we can take on today's debate edition of Citizens. We looked at the future of democracy. How can the present or next generation, Gen Z, shape democratic governance? Our guests were Indigen Job, the Deputy Speaker, National Youth Parliament of the Gambia, and Colette Obuade, African youth activist from Ghana. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, once again. And with that, we end today's edition. But We'll surely come your way next week with another topical issue of democratic concern. But for now, this is where we drop the curtains on Citizens Are on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM from Dakar, Senegal. You can find this broadcast on our website, wadr.org, and on all of our streaming platforms, particularly on YouTube at WADR News. We would love to hear from you, so send us an email to wadr@wadr.org. We say many thanks to our listeners and to our listeners on our partner radio stations, Voice of Liberia 104.1 FM in Monrovia, Kwateke Radio 100.9 FM, Bon County, Liberia. In Ghana, we were live on Radio Pad, Savannah Region, Royals FM Winchi, and Focus FM Kumasi, as well as Radio Adam in the Greater Accra region. We also say a big thanks to our listeners on our Baka Radio 97.5 FM Bauchi and Darlin FM 107.3 Owerri, Southeast Nigeria. NetZ FM, Kaduna Love FM Abuja, Eastern Radio, Konu 96.5 FM Konu, and on African Young Voices 101.6 FM Freetown in Sierra Leone, and Radio Buff 91.3 FM, Mao 91 in Sierra Leone, and Hilltop Radio in the Gambia. We'll come your way same time next week with another interesting edition of Citizens Are. But for now, my name is Christopher Aticho. It's bye for now.